Hey guys, Tim here, Big Dog Forge. Welcome back to the shop. It's good to see you again. So the project that we're working on today started back in the 1950s. Subscriber of mine, Al, sent me a letter and said that he had a knife that was made by his grandfather at work. He worked for Allegheny Steel in California. And it was made for his grandmother. And she used that knife from the 50s all the way up to 1998 when she passed. And at that point, the knife was passed along to Al's mom, and she used it for a few years and she stored it away. And a couple of years ago, she gave the knife to Al. And he contacted me and wanted to know if I could make a replica of the knife that he could use so that he could preserve the other one in a shadow box with a picture of his grandfather. And I told him that was something that I could do. But I needed a couple of things to get that done. One is I needed to improve my knife making skills, and that's taken a little bit of time. And I needed a surface grinder. So I got the surface grinder built, and I've been working on my knife making skills, so today's the day. We're going to give it a shot. All right, guys, stick with me. This should be fun. All right, guys, the first minute of this video is going to be a recap from a previous video where we made the constant contact wheel for the surface grinder, and we forged out this knife billet from a leaf spring from a mid-60s travel trailer. And the intent here was to leave it thick and begin the process of forming this knife for Al as we were building the surface grinder, and that worked out pretty well. A lot of folks asked me why I didn't forge it thinner. Well, I needed a test piece to build the surface grinder with, and this worked out really well. So Al sent me that knife. Here it is, the original knife, and this is our billet that we made, our blank. And we're going to do some basic stock removal to get this knife made. But he sent me this knife almost 17 months ago. And he's been very patient with me while I got this surface grinder built and improved my knife skills a little bit. But I think it's going to pay off for us, so let's see how this goes. Now we're using the surface grinder at this point to take the material down in thickness just a little bit. And I've marked a line along the edge with that old caliper that I've got there. Take that down too, and I'm grinding a little off either side as I go so I can keep it nice and straight and even. We're going to put a little finder belt on this and get it adjusted up there and get the surface of this just a little bit cleaner, a little nicer. All right, that's not looking too bad. And we're going to leave this blade about twice as thick as the original so that we have some meat to work with. All right, we're going to trace out our original blade, and we will leave some excess in the areas that have been ground away too far, like down towards the bolster on that blade. All right, these are our blacksmith scissors. We made these in a previous video. They're kind of fun to make. I'll leave a card up in the corner in case you want to check that video out as well. Maybe give it a shot yourself. They're a challenge. All right, so right in this area right here, we've left a little bit more template because that's been ground away so much over the years. All right. Get this lined up. It's like we have plenty of knife to work with there. Get some spray adhesive. I'll glue this guy down so she'll stay in place. There we go. And we'll spray it with some black spray paint. That'll give us a nice outline. And it's a little better than just trying to grind to the paper. The paper will wear out and go away, and the spray paint won't. We'll have to grind it away to get down to where we need to. And we're going to leave just a little bit of that line so that we have, we're within our area. We've got more grinding to do on this later, so we're just giving it a good profile at the moment. There we go. All right. We're going to use this little bevel jig that I made some time ago. just to establish the bevels on both sides. Once we get them established, I'm going to go ahead and pull it out of the jig, and we'll just grind this by hand. I've gained more confidence in hand grinding these things lately, and we're going to give it a shot. Now, this has been annealed from the forging process that we went through in the previous video, and the material's coming out pretty easily. It's pretty soft, so it didn't take long to get these bevels in. And this thing's got a flat grind on it that goes all the way up to the backbone, and it worked out pretty well. We took it down to about a 250 grit. And there we go. Getting a little closer. We still have some to grind off around the edges. We'll save that for some of the final grinding. So while this tang is nice and soft, we're going to drill some holes in it, and they're just random because we have to cast an aluminum handle on this thing, and I want to give the aluminum something to grab onto. Sort of casted pins, you might say, through the tang. And we're going to put a few divots here and there, something to give it some grip, something for the aluminum to flow into. I didn't want to drill all the way through that tang down so low. I didn't want to weaken it at all. And just like that, we're in the heat treat. We got it up to non-magnetic and held it there for about 15 minutes. And went right into this canola oil is what it is. And she came out hard as glass. So we cleaned the oil off with a rag, and the transformation to martensite was complete, and it was even all over. It was probably one of the best heat treats I've ever done. All right, we're back in the grinder, 300 grit belt, and we are just taking the scale off of this. It's a new belt, so you see a few little sparks flying, and we're just cleaning it up so we can get it in the heat treat oven. See those colors. Went in for an hour at 400 degrees. We did that twice, and it came out probably the best tempering that I've done on a knife. It just feels like this knife wants to be made. There we go. All right, moving right along. We're going to take these bevels down a little bit further, refine them a little bit, and clean up the knife. And we'll end up taking this down to about a 600 grit, and then we're going to get it over to hand sanding. And the reason I'm going so far with it in the grits is because when I get over to hand sanding, I'll go back up to the 300 grit, and it takes out those cross marks from the belt grinder pretty quickly. It saves a bunch of time, and then I just work my way back up the grits, and I think I ended up going up to about an 800 grit on this thing, on this hand sanding. And it didn't take that long. In the old days, I would use a heavy belt, get it over here, and then have to be sanding for hours on the belt sander grooves, try to get them out. And yeah, you just take it up to a finer grit. It seems to work out a lot better. And this really didn't take that long, like I said. So, and I'm getting more used to it. So it's not too bad. And I save my old worn out belts, and I use them for this hand sanding process. They seem to work really well. There we go. Got a little junk on it. We need to wash it off a little bit, but looking pretty good. All right, we need to build a guard, well, a bolster. It's not really a guard on the end of this thing. And we're going to make that out of mild steel. Now, I believe the original bolster or guard on this thing whatever you guys call it, you knife makers, was welded on at some point and then ground back down. The metals seem to be dissimilar metals on the original knife, so this is the way we're going to go with it. And this is going to be a little bit thicker plate than the one that's on the knife currently. But I believe the one that's on the knife has been ground down over the years. So this is the way we're going to go with it. We got a little gap there, but we'll go ahead and peen this thing and then grind it back down. Okay, we kind of skip that process. You guys have seen that before. What we're going to do is we're going to tack weld this guard onto the tang from the backside. And we'll get ourselves a little file with a sharp edge on it, and we're going to file some grooves in these welds, something for the aluminum to flow onto. Alright, moving right along. Boron nitride. It's an aerosol lubricant, and it's a release agent for aluminum castings when you're doing them in a steel mold. Has a lot of purposes, but that's one. Alright, this is a piece of pipe. I crushed it sort of oval and cut it in half on the bandsaw. And we're going to wire it back together. And this is going to be our mold for molding this aluminum handle around our tang. We're just going to hold it together with this wire twisted nice and tightly. Should do the job. As long as we can get most of the cracks down to almost nothing, that aluminum will freeze when it goes in and it will not run out. Alright, we get this lined up the best way we figure we can on this tang. And what we're going to do is weld the mold right to the bolster. There we go. Get just a little tack on this side. Now, the bolster itself is way oversized, so we'll be able to grind all that off. There you go. That's what the tang looks like inside there. And you can see just a little glint of light at the bottom, but we have an answer for that. It's high temperature silicone, and it will slow the flow of aluminum down enough to let it freeze in place so it doesn't flow out any cracks that we may have down at the bottom. Alright, 2 buckets. The one on the right is dry sand. The one on the left is a bucket full of very wet sand with some extra water over the top. See if we can get this aluminum in this little crucible. It's a little tall. I think we can. Yeah, there we go. We got it. Alright. So we are going to take our knife blade and stick it in the sand on the right. We're going to heat up our mold, expand a little bit, and it'll keep that aluminum from bubbling away from it. Get it nice and warm. Then we'll grab our crucible and we'll pour this. And as soon as it solidifies on the top, it'll freeze on the top pretty quickly. We'll transfer it over into the bucket full of water with the blade down in the water and the wet sand. And that'll keep the heat from transferring down into the blade. Alright, we'll let that cool off for 15-20 minutes. It was still pretty warm, so we finished cooling it off the other way. And there was no transfer of heat or colors down into the blade at all, so it looks like our temper is fine. And I checked that with a file and it looked pretty good as well. So we hit this with a chisel a little bit, and there you go. That's peeling right off there. It's amazing stuff. Very good. Now we just need to do a stock removal on this handle. And what I'm going to do is just all going to be sort of freehand. I'll do some pencil drawings on it here and there to keep myself going in the right direction. And I'm literally going to stock removal this handle down into the same shape as the existing knife, the original. And I'll keep it handy for comparison. And you can see my pencil line here. I laid the old handle over the new and just outlined it with a pencil, and it'll give me some guidelines to start with. And this was about a 3-hour session of filing and heavy stock removal down to those lines. I didn't want to go too fast. I didn't want to take too much off at a time because I was afraid of getting down into that tang, and that's one thing I didn't want to do. So in this case, slow and steady wins the race for us. So it was well worth it to take the time to do it the right way. And I figured removal with files by hand a little at a time was probably the best way to go. And it seemed to work out okay. And once we got our basic shape, we got ourselves some more broken and used up 72-inch belts, and used those to sand this thing all the way down to about an 800 grit to make sure that all the scratches and all the mars and everything were taken out of it. And I had to go, back and forth. But at this point, I had to take it over to the polishing wheel, polish it up, find a few more scratches, take it back, and sand it down a little more, and then back to the polishing wheel. But eventually we got all the scratches out, and came out looking pretty good. Let's get this polishing compound off here and see what this looks like. It's looking pretty good. There we go. I have to get an edge on this thing now. So we started with a little heavier belt to get this bevel down, and we ended up going to a used 1000 grit belt with some chalk on it. Seems to sharpen that edge up, polish it up really well. I'll give it a nice strop, and we're going to do a little carving with this thing into this piece of wood. See how this edge is. This not even sure what kind of wood this is, but it's been in the shop for about 3-4 years now, drying out up in the rafters, and it's cutting it up pretty good. And we'll see how this edge holds up after this. Just slice some paper up here. Alrighty. Now get a better grip there, Tim. There you go. And it seems to do pretty good. Not too bad, not too bad. I think that'll work pretty well. Alright, let's do a side-by-side comparison. The old knife and the new knife. You can see the, I keep calling it a bolster. I guess that's what it is. It's a little wider than the original. The original looks like it's been ground down in that area. And I think Al will be able to use this knife for many years to come. All right, guys, there you go. So one last look at the knife, and we'll give you a look at the original real quick. There you go. Thanks, Al. I really appreciate being part of the story of this knife moving forward, and it was a great honor. So thank you very much. And that's about it. So thanks, guys. Really appreciate you stopping by Big Dog Forge. If you haven't yet, think about subscribing, like, and share. And I wanted to say thanks to all the patrons out there. Really appreciate you guys. You rock. So anyway, I'm going to call it good for this time. Thanks for stopping by Big Dog Forge. Take care of yourselves. Be safe. Bye-bye now.